Okay, so in the last video, we actually got a real query up and going. We pulled in our data and we displayed that data. Now what we're going to be doing in this video is actually writing a GraphQL schema for our new resolution, which we're actually going to, it won't be storing data in it just yet, but we're going to be writing the schema. We're going to talk a little bit about GraphQL schemas and GraphQL files, okay? So let's get started first by heading to our API folder and creating a new folder inside of API named resolutions, okay? And inside of resolutions, I'm going to be creating a new file named resolutions.graphql. So I'm going to say resolutions.graphql. Now I have the GraphQL packages, including syntax, installed for VS Code. So you'll notice I immediately get a file type icon. And I'm also beginning syntax highlighting. So you want to make sure you install that stuff for your text editor so that way things look correct. So now before we actually write the schema, let's actually talk a little bit about what should be inside of it. Let's think about it this way. What kind of things would you have for a resolution? And you might have things like a name for whatever the resolution name might be. You might have when it's created at or completed at, so created at, and whether or not it's been completed. However, some of the cool things we're going to be doing is actually the resolution itself will be determined if it's completed by whether or not all the to-dos inside of it are completed. If all of those are completed, then the resolution overall would be marked as completed. So we don't need completed, and we just have created at. So this is looking kind of simple. If you think about it though, we would also want to have maybe an array of to-dos, right? We want individual to-dos. And I'm going to say to-do ID here because we want to have an array of individual to-dos that are associated with this particular resolution. So that's three things, okay? So we're going to have a new type. Okay, so when we create a new schema, we have to have a new type. Now the type is going to be the name of whatever it is. In this case, it's resolutions, okay? So the type of resolutions is going to have, it's going to actually have an ID, which is underscore ID. That comes from Mongo itself. So underscore ID, and that is going to be a string. So when we define a schema, we have to define the property and what it is. So we have an ID, which is a string. And we also have a name, which is also a string. Now, if we want to say any of these things need to be inside of this schema, we need to have an exclamation point after the type. So ID needs to be there, as well as the name. So we can have exclamation points after both of these. Okay. So we have type resolutions now. I'm going to go ahead and leave this comment here for now, okay? And we'll step back to this in a minute. Now, the reason why we don't have created at in our schema just yet is because, believe it or not, there is no date type in Apollo. So we can't have created at type of date and just expect it to work. So we'll cover that more later, okay? I'm going to have a whole video on how to get date set up. It's not that complex, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And then also with the to-do array, this is also sort of special too. And it doesn't need to be set up right now anyways. We can modify this, okay? So check it out. We have our resolutions.graphql. Now let's go ahead to our server and make a new file and name this register-api. And we can just say .js. This is inside of, I'm sorry, I should have made this more clear. It's inside of imports, startup, then server. Right next to our index.js file, we have register API. Now for my register API file, I'm going to simply import the schema itself. So we're going to import, and I'm going to say resolutions schema. I hate saying that word because I never know if it's supposed to be schema, I don't know, schema, I guess with a K. But here either way, we have import resolutions schema from, and then we're going to find that particular schema. So we can do .. .. to go back a couple of directories. We're going to grab it from API resolutions, and then we're going to grab the file resolutions. And you'll notice the app isn't really picking it up that well. And this actually has to do because this project is not going to recognize GraphQL files just yet. So you can see I'm importing resolution schema from API resolutions, resolutions.graphql. You have to type in the path here. And what's going to happen here, well, register API isn't being fired yet, so nothing will happen here just yet. But let's head to our index file and import this register API. So we're going to head to import, and we're just going to say from the current directory, register API. Now what's going to happen is, well, Meteor is going to be aware of this, and we're going to get some bugs. We're going to get some errors that say, hey, we have sort of no idea what to do with resolutions.graphql. Cannot find this module, resolutions.graphql. Like, what is this? And that's a good question. How do we get these GraphQL files to just work in our project? And the answer lies within our Babel configuration. And it's, luckily for us and everything, it's super duper easy to get Babel configured to work with GraphQL. So let's actually go ahead, and you'll notice we don't have a .babelrc file. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in the root of our project here, which is just going to be .babelrc. It's a babelrc file. And this file is where we have our configuration for Babel. I can just have a set of open brackets here, and Meteor will pick this up automatically, so we don't have to do anything fancy. And inside of here, we're simply just going to say plugins, and awesome VS Code automatically made an array for me. And the plugin we're going to want to use is Babel plugin inline import, of which we don't have installed yet. So Babel plugin inline import. Okay, just like this. Okay, cleaned it up for me, nice. And let's head to our terminal, and let's npm install -save -dev, because this is a dev package. And if you copied that from before, it's just Babel plugin inline import. Okay, Babel plugin inline import. Okay, well, this font's too large to see anyways. But basically, we just need to get this imported, configured. Our .babelrc file just simply says plugins, an array, single item. And I don't believe Meteor will pick this up automatically, but maybe it will. Let me refresh and see if we have a bunch of bugged out errors. And honestly, it looks like it picked this up, which is great news for us because it's no longer crashing, right? Okay, so super cool. I actually thought I would have had to restart the server, but it's glad to see that we don't here. So now we can close out of this, close out of that. Okay. So we've imported our register APIs. In our register API, we've simply just imported the schema, which is just this entire file, right? There's nothing in particular, there's nothing exporting out of this file. We're just importing this file itself. But we're importing it as something. Now you remember inside of our index.js on the server, we had our type defs, and we made a new schema, and we created all that stuff. Let's move this into the register APIs file. I'm going to cut this out of here. I'm going to move this into register APIs. I'm going to paste this in here, and I'm going to save all of this stuff. So index now simply, well, I got to cut out of the stuff. But index now is simply just importing register API. Register API needs to be importing create Apollo server, make executable schema, and it's importing our resolution schema. Okay, and we're going to shake this up a little bit more again in the future when we have more schemas. But for now, we have two schemas. We have the type defs and we have resolution schema. So how do we reconcile these? Because right now, the only thing our app is getting is type defs. What we want is to merge resolution schema with type defs. And if type defs was its own file, it would be coming in just as another variable here. So what type defs can have is an array. If we actually have brackets here, like this, and maybe have a comma after that backtick, we can actually bring in resolution schema just like this. Okay, let's save this. To make this less, well, disgusting here, let's actually cut this backtick string out of here and just do a const. And we can just simply name this test schema. Honestly, we're going to be getting rid of it anyways. And we can have this in here in this array. So we've created a constant variable test schema, which is the one we had before. And now, instead of typedefs just being this one query string here, we actually have an array of 1 and then 2, and then that all gets passed in as typedefs here. So when I save this, we should be seeing no errors at this point, but we're also not going to be seeing anything fancy. The app itself, it's not going to care. And since we don't have any queries, we can't do any sort of queries on this. So, well, what do we accomplish, really? Well, we got set up with being able to import GraphQL schema files. We created our first .graphql file, we imported it, and we found a way that we can add it to our typedefs simply by adding it to this array. So what this shows you is something that a lot of these tutorials don't show you with GraphQL. Because, well, we create these things like this query, but in a real project, you're going to be having a lot of schemas and they're going to be combining. So what's good about this setup is that, well, this is totally scalable. We can just keep on creating schemas, importing them, and then adding them to this typedefs array, and then those are going to be into our actual Apollo server. Okay, so that's why I wanted to take this time to make this video, because again, a lot of these things just sort of put everything in one file and sort of expect you to figure out how they are supposed to scale. This pattern right here is super scalable. I have lots of different schemas in the level up tutorials, GraphQL schema, so check it out. This is how we're doing it. So what we are actually going to be needing to do in the future is creating a new resolver that will query our resolutions, hit the database, and do all that good stuff for us. So even though this video didn't accomplish necessarily a whole lot visually or anything like that, in the next video what we're going to be doing is defining a new query, and that query is going to be attached to our resolutions schema. And although we won't be hitting the database just yet, we're actually going to be pulling information out of our new resolution schema, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.